Today on Naturally Curious, we're going to talk about radio telemetry and how it's used to track and monitor freshwater fish, which are some of the most imperiled species on our planet. As a freshwater biologist, I want to understand how, where, and when different fish species move, interact, and even compete with one another to be able to feed, migrate, mate, and lay their eggs, so I can recommend the best approaches to protect and conserve the habitats they need. Now, just as important as understanding what a fish does naturally, I also want to understand how they move and interact in response to us and our land use changes, like shoreline development, hydroelectric operations, construction of dams, or even our commercial and recreational fishing tactics. Now, telemetry itself is a huge suite of tools that allow researchers to collect information from individual fish representative of their populations. And we do this with minimal disturbance to the behavior of the fish, beyond the initial capture and tagging event, of course. Now, radio telemetry itself, this is a fun one. It allows us to collect this sort of information from fish that live in really turbulent systems, and really complex ones too, like wetlands or crazy river systems. Now, radio telemetry, it involves three components. You have your transmitter, which for our fish is implanted internally. You have your antenna, and you have your receiver. Now, these transmitters, they come in all different sizes, and which one you decide to use for your study is going to depend on the fish you're studying. It's going to depend on its size, and certainly the biological question you want to answer. You do not want this tag to weigh down your fish during its daily routines, but you also want to make sure it's big enough to collect all the information you need in one go. Now, once you have this in your fish, how do you use it? Well, you have to play with the sensitivity of the receiver called its gain, and you have to dial in using a, you guessed it, radio frequency. So just like tuning into the favorite radio station in your car on the way to work, we dial into the specific frequency that this transmitter emits so we can find our fish. Now, as mentioned, you got to play with the sensitivity. You have to train your ears to listen for the subtle changes in the high frequency beeps that this emits, and you kind of move your antenna back and forth until you're able to find your fish. It is so much fun actually doing this work. You're out in boats, canoes, you're walking along shorelines, but if your questions and study animals take you to really rugged and mountainous regions, you can actually attach these antennas to shoreline structures. Or better yet, if you get the opportunity, go for a ride in a helicopter. That's a lot of fun. Well, you know what? While we're here, why don't we try to capture one of our fish today? I found him! I have been looking for this guy all week. Oh, this is fantastic. Great timing, too. This is a sockeye salmon, and we're right here on British Columbia's own west coast. This guy's been sitting in a river estuary, and he's about to migrate into the tributary of one of the Fraser River areas. Now, this guy, he's migrating up to find himself a mate and spawn. But unfortunately, it's actually the last leg of his journey. He's a salmoparous species. That means he's going to die only spawning one time in his life. But not in vain. After he spawned and died, different wildlife, and especially scavengers, are going to drag his body into the forest. And after eating all the best parts, his body is going to decompose and release tons of nutrients into the forest ecosystem. And all the different individual sockeye salmon in his population, they're going to do the same thing. So let's let this guy get back into his river pool so he can make the rest of his journey. The more information we have about this particular salmon, others in his population, and other fish all over the world, the better picture we can paint that will help us understand how these fish interact with their environment and also our activities, so that we can better manage our river and lake systems to sustain the needs of this fish, our environment, and of course the people that live in it. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week when we talk about how fish go from lake to your plate. See you next time.